Race riots have swept Britain this week. The far right have been attacking police stations, burning businesses, attacking police officers, lynching people and attacking mosques, and sometimes attacking their own. I wonder where this could have come from.
A highly political, highly violent ideology called Islamism is sweeping our nation.
Still on this subject, as Suella Braverman has said, Islamists are in charge of Britain now.
They've got control of Caen and they've got control of London. He's actually given our capital city away to his mates.
We have a growing number of young people in this country who do not subscribe to British values, in fact, loathe much of what we stand for.
Are we talking about Muslims here?
We are.
One of the slogans that the far-right rallies have adopted is "Stop the boats." It didn't come from some backwater estate. It came from Rishi Sunak, until recently the Prime Minister of this country. And it can't be a secret to anyone that gutter rags like the Daily Mail and others have been pumping out anti-Muslim and anti-migrant propaganda for decades. We saw some very strange things during the riots. I mean, first of all, they seem to have burned down a Citizens Advice Bureau. If you're poor, I remember when I was growing up pretty poor, we were always down the CAB. It's very useful for working class people. So burning it down is probably not in the interest of poorer communities. They raided a Greggs, a blow against the working class, and a Lush. So I hope you're enjoying your pomegranate and peppermint body scrub over your swastika tattoo to keep it all smooth. And someone stole some Crocs from a shoe zone, not even proper Crocs, shoe zone Crocs. So I don't even know what the thinking was there. Turns out that by taking their country back, what they actually meant was taking mobile phones from O2. I can't recall an expectation that white people had to get their house in order when they were digging bodies out from under Fred West patio, or when Jimmy Savile ran amok and abused people for years. But I don't recall white people being told they had to get their house in order when someone shot 16 kids and a teacher in Dunblane, or any number of other examples like that. When people of colour commit crime, it always seems to be connected to their culture and ethnicity. Almost immediately there were claims that the alleged killer in Southport was a migrant that had come off a boat. There was almost a desperation. There was a desire for whoever did this to be a Muslim. And when it was revealed, in fact, he was a British Christian kid, there was a rapid attempt to reorientate it about this kid being black. Apparently he's from a Rwandan background, and the speed with which it was redirected. But they forget that a man of colour went in to try and save those girls, one of whom also was from a migrant background, as I understand it. And then 2 days later, in the same country, down the road, still in North England, you have black people and Muslims being lynched, actually lynched, like it's the American South. We're definitely seeing something like it was in the 1970s when the National Front were on the street and Asians, black people being beaten up on the street. There's definitely an echo of that. The far right have been resurgent for a number of reasons, and one of those reasons is the way that people who are for Palestine, they want to see justice for Palestine, have been demonised, not just by the far right, not just by these grifters like Tommy Robinson and co, but also by elements within the British state.
To my mind, there's only one way to describe those marches. They are hate marches.
It is bizarre to suggest that hundreds of thousands of people, mums with prams, nans, students, people coming out on the demos that I've been out on myself, the massive demos in solidarity with Palestine, are somehow, by any stretch of the imagination, hate marches, but that people burning down businesses and attacking mosques are expressing legitimate concerns, I think is the term that they like to use. That is completely bizarre. It does beg a question when you look at the kind of contours of racism and prejudice in this country. If it were synagogues being burnt down, would any of the figures we've talked about today be as quiet as we are now? I suspect not. If you're a student of history, and if you look at the rise of the Nazis and prejudice in other places, you will see that in the press and by public figures, there's a long process of demonisation and framing those people as an enemy within who need to be disciplined and marginalised and ultimately gotten rid of. Fascism is a complex beast. How it changes and reformulates around different things. Before the Second World War, Jewish people were the punchbag. At other times it's been other people, it's been the Irish, it's been black people in this country. At the moment, the punchbags, the people who are othered and demeaned, are Muslims. That's very clear. And part of that is about British foreign policy. Islamophobia is a key component in British foreign policy around places like Gaza. In the past, around places like Iraq and Afghanistan, Islamophobia was a key element. It was part of the intellectual case. Britain didn't go to war in those places just because it doesn't like Muslims. It went there to take their things. Islamophobia or other kinds of racism in other contexts is always the lubricant. It's what dehumanises those people so that people can allow it to happen and not feel too bad, because those people aren't really people. They're some other kind of people. They're some lesser order of people. And it's absolutely essential, not just to far-right politics, it's completely built on it, but also to British foreign policy. I myself was involved in the war in Afghanistan as a soldier, and I'm aware, have seen the devastation that was caused. So it's completely understandable. This is cause and effect, that people would not be able to live there anymore because of the violence that the occupation produced. If you're moaning about brown people being in this country, you have to understand that many of those people are here precisely because we were in the countries which they may have originated in. And that is still the case with people coming over to the UK now. Many of them are Afghans, many of them are Syrians, many of them are Iraqis. These are all places which Britain has interfered with or occupied. This is not just a historical process, okay? This is something that is now, that continues to happen. We have a colonial past, as I've said before, but also a colonial and an imperial present. You have to be able to look at this from the perspective of the ruling class. They benefit from this stuff. Remember, fascism serves the ruling class, it serves capitalism. That's what it's for. It's to put us all back in our place when things are going badly wrong. When the capitalist class see people from working class communities, white, brown, black, Muslim, whatever, they are laughing. It suits them that we're all at each other's teeth. The person to the right and left of you is not the enemy. It's the person up there who's taking a big chunk of your wages for his own enrichment. He wants you to fight. It's a story as old as time, as old as class itself. That I don't see a working class which is white. There are white working class people. There is a section of the working class which is white. I come from it myself, I'm very aware of it, but the idea that there is only a white working class, these ridiculous ideas. It's an economic category. It's people who sell their labour. So the working class is multi-ethnic, incredibly diverse. And what I would like to see and hope I see is the trade unions in this country. They have historically always been the organised working class, an essential barrier against fascism and racism. And it needs to be that again, because there's more of this stuff, as I've said, coming down the pipe. The economy continues to decay. The far right will be there waiting to latch onto it. Fascists have always been conspiracists. And one recent expression of that, which I often see, for example, on veterans forums, is the Great Replacement Theory, which is this kind of victim fantasia that white people are being replaced. These should be, at most, marginal theories held onto by a couple of cranky weirdos. But there are major public figures who seem to have some kind of sympathy towards these ideas. One of those is Elon Musk, who often cites theories like that or adjacent to that. And this is much more serious because he's not just some marginalised weirdo. This is a man who owns a social media platform. And that, of course, just expands it. It's exponentially more dangerous and more people will be engaged with it. So we have to remember, this man was born into wealth. He's an oligarch. He is not your friend. I always go back to the idea that the enemy comes in a private jet and not a boat. We have to understand this is part of what fascists do. They are parasitic. They parasitise causes and they parasitise events, whether it's questions about immigration, whether it's girls in Rotherham being gang raped, etc., etc. They will always try and parasitise those events. And it is not because fascists are somehow feminist. Fascism, I think, has a particular appeal, masculine appeal. It prizes masculinity, in particular a kind of militarised and violent masculinity. And I think that's something that's happened over the Southport killings and the subsequent riots. We're all looking at common factors. And for people on the right, that seems to be race. He's from here, he might be that. To the point where they even made it up. They wanted it to be a certain thing. It was actually something else, but they jumped on it. Refugee background, migrant background, a black kid, or whatever. But I think probably a more important uniting factor when we look at these kind of events, when we look at killings against women and girls, but also against other people, is that it's basically always blokes and violent masculinity. I suspect in the long term that is something we will see, perhaps in the case of the young man who carried out the killing, but certainly also in the response. There's been some discussion about measures which the state will take against protesters and particular kinds of IDs, particular kinds of surveillance, and this is a very dangerous and slippery slope. And we've seen under the Tories, and I would suggest it will continue under Starmer, all kinds of authoritarian bills about protest, about surveillance, about policing powers, about intelligence powers coming down the pipe. And the ones the Tories brought in, it's very unlikely Starmer, who has a profound authoritarian streak, will get rid of them. I remember very keenly the London riots and the response to that. They were running 24-hour courts to get these kids off the street and into jail. We can't stop those processes. The state will do what it does, but we need to be able to look at the deeper causes, why people get caught up in violence like that. Clearly, the main agitators were bussed in these cases, but it also seems clear to me that there were some local people, particularly young people, we saw in the case of the lynchings in Hull, who get dragged into it, and we have to look at why. what's going on in their lives, that they would be pulled into these explosions of violence. And I would suggest the age-old story is, if we look at the conditions in those communities about what's been taken away, what they feel they need to do to be dignified and have the opportunities they need. I think we need to talk about all those things, because a lot of those kids are probably going to end up in jail, same as after the London riots, and then their problems and their attitudes are very likely to be compounded. Austerity, cost of living, the lack of opportunities, the education system being made unreachable by many people. When you look at the causes of those problems, that's not Muslims, that's not migrants. Migrants didn't close down your library, that was the government. That was because things have been cut. It's because capitalism is in decay and they don't want you to have nice things anymore. So we should look at that and always argue against fascists and the far right when they come into our communities and say, oh, look at him, he's your enemy, look at what he's doing, because it's not the case. Not for the first time, we've seen the role of the mainstream media in causing events like this. You're not going to get the kind of nuanced analysis which you need to have from them. If you want to support independent media, join Double Down News on Patreon. And check out my other film on Remembrance Sunday, where it could be argued all this started.